in this lesson, we're looking at inverse notation. So we touched on it in the last lesson a little bit. Here we're going to be touching on it more. And we're going to be looking at restricting the domain. And we're going to restrict the domain for one reason. And so its inverse is a function 2. Okay? So write that down, have a look at it. Let's get straight into the video. All right, so we're going to find the inverse of this function. Okay? So in reality, we have to swap x and y. And in this case, what's y? Hopefully you go f of x is y. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to rewrite that function down. F of x, I'm actually going to give me a line down here because I'm going to need space. F of x equals x cubed plus 5. All right. Now I'm going to swap x and y. So let's explain that. Swap x and y. So I've got x equal y square cubed plus 5. Now I need to make y the subject. So I'm going to go y cubed and I'm going to go x minus 5. So I've just moved this guy to the other side and I've swapped things around. I've moved this guy to there. All right. Now I'm going to cube root both sides because I want to get y by itself. So therefore y equals the cube root of x minus 5. Okay. Now let's use this inverse function notation. Therefore, the inverse function of x equals the cube root of x minus 5. Okay. Now what we've done is that we've actually properly found its inverse. And that's actually beautiful work right there. So we can keep going now. But now we've got this situation happening here. We've got to substitute that into that and hopefully we'll get that. And then we've got to substitute that into that and hopefully also get that. Okay? So I'm going to write that out and hopefully you're following in. So it's the inverse function. I'm going to write the inverse function again up here so you can clearly see x minus 5. So in that inverse function, instead of having x, I'm going to put in f of x. All right. Now, what's f of x? Well, f of x is this guy here. F of x is x cubed plus 5. So instead of x, I am going to put, and I'm going to make note of it in the brackets, this function in here. X cubed plus 5 minus 5. So all I've done is instead of x, I've put in the function of x, which is this guy here, in its place. Notice that the minus 5 and the minus 5 stay in the same spot. Okay, now what happens there? Well, there's these brackets, they hold no real value. All I'm going to do is get rid of them, okay? And if I get rid of them, it means I can cancel this 5 with that minus 5, okay? So what am I left with? I'm left with the inverse function of f of x is equal to the cube root of x cubed. Now we know that just equals x. And that's what we needed to do because we needed to do that there as required. Now we need to do the opposite too. So I'm going to write in a different color pen. So I'm going to go f of x equals x cubed plus 5. And now instead of that, I'm going to substitute the inverse. So I'm going to substitute the inverse guy in for x. So instead of this guy, x, I'm going to put in the inverse function, this guy, in. So let's do that. So I'm going to put brackets to make note of it. So it's the cube root of x minus 5 and all cubed. Oh, that's handy. Now you can see that this cube is going to undo this cube root there. So we're simply going to be left with x minus 5, and then this plus 5 will bring down plus 5. And we can clearly see we can cancel those out, and that equals x. So we're in the same position, so we're winning. And that's what we wanted also. as required. So it works. Woohoo! Okay, what we're going to do is one more thing. We're going to talk about domain and range. So we're going to bring in this y equals x guy, x squared, sorry, this guy. Y equals x squared. Now the inverse, we said we're going to swap x and y, so it's x. I'm going to do it in a different color. X equals y squared, so I'm going to draw that guy there. All right. Now there's one problem with this guy, and it is that it fails the vertical line test. If I do a vertical line test, it crosses here and here. So the inverse function, or this guy here, is not a function. So what we're going to do is that us mathematicians will go, we can fix that. So there's two ways we can fix it. I'm just going to show you one. Is we're going to get rid of that bottom bit. So all we have now is that top bit. Okay. Now to get rid of that top bit, we actually have to change the original function. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab and I'm going to get rid of this guy here, because that's what's reflecting down to the bottom. And now I have the mirror image. So how do I have to do? I have to restrict the domain. So I'm going to rewrite my question. Graph y equals x squared, where x is greater than or equal to 0. So all we're doing is all the values on this side of the graph. So really important with that. Okay. So on this side of the graph, all right, so all the positive values, which means it only includes this side of our graph, okay? So that means it's the inverse function, the inverse is indeed a function and passes our very tricky vertical line test. It only crosses once. All right, peace out.